Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Looks like we have 8 attendees on here. I was just speaking with one of them offline on the phone, and he'll be up next on the agenda. It does look like we're waiting for Captain Hong to get on, so
We have a quorum, but we don't have our first speaker today.
But Jeff is on, and he said he's ready to go. I think, or let me actually just confirm with him really quick. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Commissioner Jake Valaschini. It is Wednesday, April 12th at 7:03 p.m. We have a quorum, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. I am here along with Commissioner Peter Wood, and this is the ABC and Public Safety Committee for ANC 1C in Adams Morgan. So it looks like we do not actually have our first guest here. We normally hear a public safety update from Captain Hong from Precinct 303. He's not here right at this moment, so I am going to actually turn it over to the second folks who were on the agenda, and that is a presentation by Jeff Jackson and the owner of Cocktail Works LLC, which is considering a new retailer Class C restaurant CR application, ABRA 124183, for the Karakoy Bar, which will be located at 2400 18th Street Northwest. That application is in the file folder for the meeting tonight. And Sean, can we please promote them?
Absolutely.
Can you raise your hands? Jeff, could you also have the owner raise their hand too, so we can promote them? Great. Looks like Radovan is also. Perfect. All right. Jeff, why don't you take it away? Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, thanks for having me. Yeah, Jeff, representing Karaoke, located at 2400 18th Street. Have the owner with me. It's going to be a full-service restaurant, and the owner, you can discuss what type of restaurant it's going to be, and if you have the rendering that we spoke of, you can present that.
Hey,
Great.
Jake. Jeff, sorry.
Jeff, do you want to mute so he can speak?
All right. So first of all, thank you for having us here, and I'm very excited to be part of the Adams Morgan community and to bring this concept to the neighborhood.
That's great. Could you just state your name for the record too, so we have it?
So, sorry, you kind of froze. That's why I stopped. My name is Radovan Jankovic, owner of Future Karaoke Restaurant. It's a bar-centric, I would say, again, Brazilian restaurant. We are aiming to deliver full food menu, and of course, using inspiration of caipirinhas to bring, Brazilian soul to it. Definitely looking to have comprehensive artistic music programming in terms of like listening bar ambiance, where we're gonna be playing mostly old school vinyls and turntables, and that's also what we have over there. I would say entertainment requests for the our liquor license. We're gonna have like a large collection of about like 600 vinyls that we're gonna continue expanding, mostly Brazilian, but just like kind of to start with, our space is 3,000 square foot. About 45% of that size of the restaurant is like a kitchen. So obviously we're going to utilize the kitchen and have also charcoal grill as a sort of like a part of the back bar that we're going to kind of have like being able to showcase like a charcoal Brazilian style charcoal cooking, and the concept should come to life by the end of the year. And it's going to be like about 65 seats indoor, or 60 seats indoor, about 30 to 35, can't remember, outside. So close to 100 guests. I would say between 5 to 10 p.m. it's going to be like a reservations only, that we can like 100% control our seating and maximize, the capacity of the place. And then in between 10 and 1 or 2 a.m. it would be like a more of a somewhat casual, but always controlled and regulated, never really, just kind of being loose. Anybody can walk in and stuff like that. So that's the idea. I owned a restaurant called Residence on 18th Street. Very recently, I sold it to my business partner. I signed his lease and I decided to take on this project. We are making quite significant investment, about $1.1 million. So I'm looking to build Class A restaurant and also at the same time make a destination for people across the DMV area versus just, being like a foot traffic and stuff like that. Looking to bring something good to Adams Morgan, maybe slightly more elevated than the rest of the folks on 18th Street, but, something more closer to Revelers Hour, Tail of Goat. La Peace is great. I know the guys from La Peace opening another restaurant next doors. So definitely to be on that level, not a Michelin star, but maybe a Michelin Big Gourmand. I want us to promote Adams Morgan as a very vibrant place. I'm also happy to be next to Grill from Ipanema. It was like a very traditional Brazilian place, and we are not competition, but they are inspiration for me, and proudly represent cuisine and ambiance overall, what Brazilians usually do the best. So that's the goal. But
it sounds great, and we're so excited that you're doubling down on Adams Morgan and making such a investment in the neighborhood. Overall, it sounds really lovely, and I'd be the one question I think I had for Jeff when we spoke yesterday was about whether or not you'd be willing to enter into a settlement agreement with the ANC. It's a very typical thing that we do with most new places in the neighborhood, as you know, just making sure that we've got some, health, noise, safety stuff worked out in advance. We're not trying to put any undue harm on any of the businesses that come in. We're really reasonable folks here, and really are just trying to make sure that it's a win-win for the neighborhood and the business owner. But we're really happy to work with you all on it if you're open to it.
I appreciate it.
Yes, we are.
Cool.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wood, do you have any questions?
There's just one, but it's something that can be addressed in some agreement. I think I speak for a lot of constituents excited to see this particular space not be vacant and like wish the best for all the businesses in the neighborhood, but that particular place is visible enough and it's a good location. So like doubly hope that it goes well. Also, I'm partial. I've lived in Brazil. have a lot of Brazil in my life, so I like the theme a lot. And you're in good company. There's a couple other Brazilian places down the street. Just one question, it comes up a lot, just to make sure that you've addressed it. Trash. What trash buildup do you anticipate? How do you plan on making sure that trash is something that's well contained?
So I feel like, I'm going way above, standard restaurants in Washington, D.C. And thankfully we have the whole alley. Usually the biggest problem for trash issue is like an actual space where the trash is held. We have the whole alley over there that's served to be for the building and for the restaurant. In the way I negotiated with the landlord is to be able to maintain that and take a charge of that. So I'm in a full control of the trash of the building, but of the restaurant. So what we are doing right now, we are about to build a separate outdoor walk-in cooler that's going to be air conditioned in the summer months and going to have an airflow. So that means like we're going to be able to hermetically close our trash, and that way prevent rodents, accessing trash and eating the food. And that's like the main reason why the rats kind of really pile up, because that's a source of food, obviously. And if we can eliminate that, we're going to, be 90% successful in, eliminating that part from our surrounding. However, they're going to move somewhere else up the street. That's something that we all should kind of impact as best as possible. Massive issue in DC, and I'm taking very seriously. At the same time, you are recycling, you're composting, and obviously making sure the trash is like a separate in different bins. And at the same time, most likely this trash is going to get collected every 2 days. It's not going to be every 5. So if you have excessive amount of trash, it might be every day, beside a Sunday or Saturday. So that's our kind of like thinking process in order to handle the trash. So the walk-in cooler panels already arrived, and we are just about to make the walk-in cooler larger. There is one existing right now, but it's not large enough. So we're gonna make a 16 by 6 kind of walk-in cooler box, and we're gonna be able to sort out like a six trash bins, 2 of them for recycle and 4 for solid food. So that's the kind of like a way we're gonna approach this issue.
That's really good.
And that area also going to be power washed periodically with rodent deterrent compound.
No, that's great. That's super comprehensive. You've clearly spent a lot of time thinking of it. It might not even matter what you sell. That might alone make you the most popular restaurant in this neighborhood. Just how much thought you put towards trash mitigation. So I really appreciate that.
No, very, very important. Honestly, I learned that in DuPont Circular we had like only capacity of 4 bins at a time, and it was very, very challenging to deal with it. We had trash company coming every day. So in the same time, we'll encourage our tenants of the building above us. There's 16 units, to stick to those regulations, and it's going to be very controlled. At the moment, the restaurant next doors is using our trash room, but most likely they're going to have to discontinue once we are fully operate. At the moment, I mean, I don't mind. We didn't still renovate the place, but very soon we're going to have to give them a notice and let them know that they would have to sort it out in their property line. So that's just heads up. So
That's great. And just one other question. I mean, you might not have an answer, and that's okay. Estimated timeline for when you're hoping to get doors open. Do you have any idea yet?
Again, we are building a kind of Class A restaurant, as they say out there, and there was like a minor structural issues in the building. The landlord is taking care of that starting today. They started, fixing that part, making sure that safety is in place. And at the same time, we are trying to handle our electrical load. As soon as that happens, we're going to get in for permits. So by the end of the year, we should open, and it's like about 6 months. Obviously, you never know if anything else is going to pop out and prevent us from like meeting our targeted date. But yeah, I would say 6 months from now, we should be kind of on a finish line, if not open.
That's good. And like you said, there's a lot of things that can come up, and we understand the permitting process. So there's nothing we can hold against you, just out of curiosity for our own reference. So that's nice. But that's all the questions I have. Thanks so much to both of you, Jeff and Radovan.
Thank you.
Great questions, Peter, Commissioner
Thank
Wood.
you.
Are there any questions from the public? Folks can feel free to raise their hand. Sean will elevate you. Or you can drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds. Peter, can you count down from 5 to 1 in Portuguese?
Yeah, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to move that we support for this liquor license application.
I second that. And since it's only the 2 of us here tonight, I don't think we need anything more than that.
I think that's true.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Fantastic. It's moved to the full ANC. So it'll show up on our May agenda. And it does look like there's actually one question in the chat, which is, are there plans for outdoor seating?
Yes, of course. You know, I found this space being very unique, and being on a corner and having like this beautiful patio out there. I would assume it's going to be like around 30 seats out there, very well taken cared of, maintained, and you know, definitely to make the corner lively. You know, in the same time, landlord is, you know, he's gonna improve a bit of external part of the building as well, possibly changing doors or windows, something like that. They've been addressing him. So yeah, very exciting, man. It's a beautiful space, beautiful corner. Yeah, definitely outdoor patio seating.
That's great. Well, thank you. And there's a comment in the chat from Julia who just said that she appreciates this type of higher end restaurant coming to our neighborhood. And I have to say, I really appreciate the investment that you all are making in Adams Morgan. It's really great to see. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the May ANC meeting, where the full commission will vote on whether or not they will adopt our support for your license.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great to be part of the neighborhood.
It sounds like you will not also need then a stipulated license in the interim time, because you're not looking to open it until the end of the year. So you won't be seeking our support for a stipulated license?
That's correct.
Okay, good to know. Well, in between, either Peter or I will reach out to you to start talking about getting the settlement agreement in the works.
Sure, look
Excellent.
forward to it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you attending tonight. It's been good having you here.
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to just look again to see whether or not we have Captain Hong on here yet. It looks like we do not. I tried emailing him, and he did confirm a couple of days ago that he was planning to come. So he might have had something come up. I'm not sure. We can just move on to the next item on the agenda. And we will go to him when he arrives, if we can. So the next item on the agenda is the Adams Morgan moratorium zone expiration. We're going to open it up to discuss and take public comment on the moratorium zone just generally. And then also the committee has a resolution that we put in place, very similar to the resolution that the committee adopted back in December and sent to the full committee. Some minor changes have been made to it. So that is up. But first, I wanted to open it up for any final comments that folks have about the expiration generally, and then we'll get into the resolution itself. So if any anyone from the public would like to make any general comments before we jump into the resolution? It looks like Tracy. So nice to have you here, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for attending.
I appreciate it. Is it okay to chat, to talk?
Yes, absolutely. Please,
Okay.
love your thoughts on it.
I'm not sure about the full procedures and everything like that, but I just wanted to share with everyone. I have lived in the loft of Adams Morgan on Champlain Street since the building erected in 2002. And so I have been, and I'm on the alley side of all of the restaurants and bars and everything. And so I've, I think I've bared the brunt of what it used to be and where we are now, in terms of noise and a lot of traffic and all of that kind of stuff, especially pre-COVID. But back in 2002, it was kind of a nightmare because the building hadn't existed, and it used to be an old parking lot for those who haven't lived in Adams Morgan long enough. And so I just wanted to share, I've been very active with MOUs with certain bars, clubs, and restaurants in the neighborhood for noise control. And so I just wanted to join because, you know, with the tavern licenses and the moratorium that's on, you know, I'm not an expert on it and the nuances, but the idea of adding more bars that don't offer food don't sit well with me personally, because I feel victimized with all the noise. I just feel like the bar scene brings noise and music, which can be a nuisance to the residents and the constituents that live on the backside, and everywhere else too on the other side of Adams Morgan. So I just wanted to kind of voice that to say, you know, I'm so excited about the Brazilian restaurant. I welcome more restaurants to come into the neighborhood. I'm not necessarily a big fan of tavern only if they're only going to serve alcohol. Our neighborhood is becoming more dangerous, and a lot of burglaries and robberies and things are happening that haven't been so proactive in the past. And so I just wanted to share my perspective, because I think unless you've lived on this side and have experienced it, you don't know. Like the vibrations from the music, I can literally feel in my apartment. I've had other ANC members and commissioners come over just to hear some of the music themselves at times when it was really bad. It's gotten better, but it still exists. And I know there's an entertainment endorsement that kind of is layered on top of the taverns, which make it into kind of like a club, even though there's no club licenses in this neighborhood. But I just wanted everyone to be aware of it.
Thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. And it sounded like we have two other, at least Julia, I think, wanted to be promoted. Unless that was, it sounds like that might have actually, or Lori wanted to speak. But that was about the resolution itself, I think.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Lori. You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've been a resident of Adams Morgan for 23 years, and I support having a vibrant Adams Morgan community that's a mix of residents and businesses, responsible businesses. I think we have enough taverns in this area, and that keeping the Adams Morgan a tavern moratorium would be a very positive benefit for the residents and other businesses and the neighbors, because there's a lot of negatives that come with having taverns, and the more taverns, the more problems that they create. Also, the resolution would increase the number of taverns by more than 50% when we already have a high density of taverns in our neighborhood. And again, I'm not in favor of ending the moratorium or amending it.
Thank you, Lori, for your comments. Appreciate it. There are a couple other comments in the chat that I'm happy to read into the record, unless either Julia or Deborah would like to make public comment. Oh, it looks like Julia raised her hand.
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
I can hear you now, Julia.
Okay, great. Yes, I did write a couple of notes. I'm also a long-term resident of the neighborhood over 20 years, and I just wanted to reiterate and what the other residents have said, and I agree exactly with what they said about the number of taverns, the noise, the type of person that it brings to the neighborhood. I really like the idea of the gentleman who spoke before with the Brazilian restaurant. I would love to see more interesting shops and restaurants of that type. When I go to, down on U Street or H or somewhere else, or even Cleveland Park now, you see a wider and broader and more interesting variety. If you allow more taverns, you're stuck in a rut, and that's what you draw, into what you draw around you. And I sense that it will act as a deterrent to something that could lift the neighborhood up. And that is my concern with the noise, the quality people would bring in, trash. And, there have been, I've noticed in the neighborhood, an increased number of people who are, addicted or drunk or, having problems of that sort in the neighborhood. And I would not want to do anything to promote that.
Thanks, Julia. I would just note that for the last 20 years, we've had a moratorium in place, and yet businesses have not filled in a lot of those gaps, like non-tavern businesses haven't filled in a lot of those gaps. And so, with 20 years of experimenting with it and having the option for other types of businesses to move into the neighborhood, not a whole lot of them have. And, one of the examples that you pointed to was U Street, where they actually got rid of their moratorium. And that's where there is actually a wide variety of different types of businesses that have also come into that area after they got rid of their moratorium zone. So I don't think that it's just a simple one thing. The moratorium leads to an expansion of different types of businesses, and no moratorium leads to only taverns. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than just that. Commissioner Wood?
Hey, thanks. Kind of going off that. First, if I'm not mistaken, I think U Street actually had a proposal for a moratorium that never became a moratorium. I don't think it was ever removed, but I went to the same point, which is that, it's a fascinating thing we've talked about for several months now. I think that, at least in my opinion, and I think I've heard a lot of people speak similarly, ideally, all of the vacant spots in our neighborhood and others would be filled by businesses that don't need to sell alcohol at all, and wouldn't need to sell anything in the quote unquote economy's device. But cannabis shops, things like that, often make money, and in some cases that's what moves in. And it's not the most fortunate thing, but we've had several decades of really trying to incentivize a more diverse local economy, diverse in terms of daytime operation as well, and not just nighttime. And it's a challenging thing, because in the meantime, a lot of turnovers happen with businesses. So at least from the ANC's perspective, this is an opportunity to try to address why that might be and how it relates to the moratorium zone, which is not clear cut. There's not a great database for the types of statistics you want. Saw one comment mentioning that police stats can somehow show that there's a direct correlation between taverns and alcohol consumption and crime. We've asked them on this very meeting before, and they said they don't know of those being available. I've looked in more broader databases of just academic research that has kind of established or tried to establish some sort of research perspective on that type of relationship. The closest that can come, and it's hard when you get into really small things as opposed to like big areas getting statistics. Vacant units often attract people that are more prone to criminal behavior, as opposed to places that have people coming in. That's not to say that there's not negative consequences for people that are intoxicated being around. Though I will also say, for example, in my SMD that I represent, there's at least one place that has a tavern license that is one of the quietest operators I know, which is the billiards place that's downstairs. That's not to say every place that has a tavern license will operate in that way, but it's just to say that there's a diversity of function. And the moratorium zone as it currently stands doesn't really have any impact on the mechanisms at play that ANCs and other institutions can do to, kind of a strong hand, or at least get in the way of what we perceive to be potentially bad faith actors getting a hold of liquor licenses and having those spaces under their operation. It's hard. There's no perfect way, because in one sense you become too regulatory of a state, in another sense you become too laissez-faire. ANCs don't have direct power in either case, but we can still try to influence the resolution, or the process at play. So I really have appreciated everyone talking. I think that if anything, the people I've spoken to in the neighborhood all agreed that no one really wants there to be just excessive noise, excessive trash, things like loitering, and especially loitering that results in vandalism. And if there's any connection to things like violent crime, that's obviously not something that everyone wants. And the patterns of that happening in the past have been something that at least coincided with the current moratorium zone. Not necessarily a causal relationship, but at least it's not something that has deterred it entirely, because it's happened. So this is, I think, been a few months of opportunity to really address those questions, which are hard. I'm kind of lecturing now, so I'll stop. But I really do appreciate everyone that has taken time tonight and otherwise to voice their opinions, because there's a lot of different ones, but I think that we have pretty similar goals as a community, and that makes it a lot more fruitful process.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. I note that there are some more comments in the chat that have popped up. I'm going to move us to the next item on the agenda, which is consideration of the resolution itself, and would be happy to discuss some of these comments in light of the resolution itself. So I'm going to introduce the resolution really quickly. The resolution is titled ANC 1C Resolution regarding the Adams-Morgan Moratorium Zone. And there are several whereas clause that kind of establish the background and why we're taking the action that we are. And I'll move on to the resolved. The resolved is that we request that the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board renew the existing Adams-Morgan zone on taverns, but increase the number of allowable tavern licenses in the Adams-Morgan moratorium zone to 25 from the current 18 to 25. So that's an increase of 7 tavern licenses in Adams-Morgan, with 18 currently in place, which means less than a 50% increase. It's somewhere about a third to 40% increase in the number of taverns phased in, with no more than 4 new licenses a year. So that will give time and opportunity for the neighborhood to try to negotiate settlements with those new taverns, and to make sure that any taverns that come into place in Adams-Morgan would actually have the support of the ANC and would be operating in good faith. Also, that it be it resolved that we request that the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board renew the existing Adams-Morgan moratorium zone on nightclubs. So to be clear, we are calling for the continuation of the moratorium zone. We are just lifting the cap on taverns by less than 50%, and also continuing the moratorium zone as to nightclubs. Be it further resolved that we request that the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board strictly enforce the current settlement agreements in place in Adams-Morgan in order to lessen any negative externalities associated with the new licenses. Part of the reason why the commissioners feel that the moratorium zone is not a good tool is that it strictly prohibits many different types of businesses, whereas settlement agreements allow for more of a scalpel approach to things as opposed to a cudgel approach. we can more carefully work with the type of license that we want to be able to, businesses that we want to be able to have in the neighborhood, and less the type that we don't. So a good example of this is that currently the bookstore on 18th would like to be able to, Sean, would you mind dropping a link to the resolution? It was sent out to the neighborhood list this afternoon. But the bookstore would like to be able to sell some wine along with book readings. They can't do that under any current licensing structure. They couldn't get a restaurant license because they're not going to sell food as a bookstore. A tavern license is the only type of license that would actually work for them to be able to sell wine with some book readings. And being able to work with a store like that wanted a tavern license in order to be able to do something like that seems like a good thing and a benefit to the neighborhood, to me and to others. So that is that. And then we encourage the Adams Morgan Business Improvement District and the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and Culture to work to educate Adams Morgan businesses as to how they can and should abide by noise, health, and safety regulations. And finally, that it be further resolved that we encourage the Adams Morgan ANC to continue to enter into settlement agreements with all new liquor selling establishment in Adams Morgan, and to lessen any negative externalities associated with new liquor selling establishments. So all of that is to say that while the current proposal would increase the total number of tavern license in the neighborhood by a phased in amount over a couple of years to about a 40% increase from what we have right now, it would be done carefully and slowly, and through the use of tools like settlement agreements that allow us to do it in a way that would hopefully lessen any negative externalities associated with these in the neighborhood. So that is a summary of it. And again, I would be happy to open it up to public comment. Captain Hong, I see your comment. Thank you. We will get to you next after we go through the moratorium zone. Should hopefully not be too long. Thank you for your patience. No worries that you're late. We know that you're busy. Looks like Lori would like to speak. Oh, sorry. Actually, we have to allow commissioners to give comment first. So Peter, if you want to just speak really quickly, and then we can let Lori go next.
Yeah, definitely. I have some lengthier thoughts that I might just wait till the May meeting if we support it for the May meeting. But one specific thing, there's a clause that says we being the Adams Morgan ANC, encouraging the Adams Morgan ANC to continue it. I'm just trying to, I don't know how the best way to phrase what I'm catching this, but it seems we're trying to resolution encouraging ourselves to do something. So I'm wondering if it should be nixed or if it should be modified in some way.
I struggle with how to write that, but also I think it's okay for us to encourage ourselves to do things. So especially the us now, encouraging the us's in the future to continue to do it. But if you have a tweak as to language, I'd be welcome to it.
That makes sense. I mean, like I've said before on other meetings, we can write whatever we want in a resolution. We don't write laws, so we don't have to be listened to, but there's not really harm in saying, hey, you should do this, whoever we're talking to. So in this case, maybe we could say something like just kind of language that reaffirms that Adams Morgan and the ANC 1C's priority as it communicates to ABCA, which is former ABRA, something like that. Like we are communicating that to make it clear that ABCA knows that there are tools in place that ANC 1C intends to use. So it's at least speaking to someone as opposed to speaking to ourselves. Kind of a minute point, not the biggest deal, but I just pick that up.
Cool. That makes sense. You can go ahead and tweak the language right now, however you'd like. In the interim, let's open it up to any other public comment on this.
Hi, this is Lori. I want to tell you my experience with trying to negotiate a settlement with a new tavern that appeared. I live directly across the street from. It was one for which there did not appear to be a tavern license, but one was magically obtained and created. And after a lengthy process of trying to negotiate a settlement agreement with them, we failed and they went to hearing. And as a result, there were vast externalities that were imposed in the neighborhood. And I just want to remind the ANC that Adams Morgan includes residents, and you're elected to represent the residents of there, not the businesses. And it is a real burden on residents the more we increase the taverns. And I know you said 40%. My understanding had been that there was 16, not 18 numbers, but I could be wrong on that. But a 40% increase in an area already overrun with taverns is a problem. And I ask you to seriously consider the impact on the neighbors.
I appreciate that, Lori. I sent out a survey over the past 4 months. I've had members of my ANC filling out the ABC of my single member district filling it out. I've gotten over 40 responses from the neighbors. 70% are in favor of either lessening the moratorium zone or doing away with it completely. So I don't think it's as simple as Lori says that she doesn't like it, and thus the commissioners are not listening to the neighbors. I don't think that that's an accurate way to describe the situation right now. Many of the commissioners have reached out, have spoken with neighbors, have asked them their thoughts. And I mean, Lori, maybe you'd be surprised that many of your neighbors actually don't agree with you on this. And they like having more options for restaurants and bars and other places to go out in the neighborhood. So I'd encourage you to maybe reach out to more folks in the neighborhood and ask them their opinion on it, because you might be surprised. Commissioner Wood.
There was one point, I've raised this in past meetings, but it's worth repeating just because it's easy to kind of get mixed up. Well, I guess two related points. One, as I said before, in ANC doesn't have any actual like law writing power. We're just suggesting things. And in this case, we're suggesting things to an agency, ABCA, or the ABC board of ABCA, with other institutions suggesting things, many of which contradict one another. So it's helpful to kind of emphasize points, even if, for example, to say, we as a commission, this is hypothetical, we as a commission want to take this extreme position, whatever that might be, doesn't necessarily mean in this kind of context that is the end goal of that extreme position. Just recognizing that if there's countering positions, that the end result is probably going to be ABCA interpreting this and trying to find a middle ground. They have a history of doing that. So I'm not suggesting taking radical position necessarily, but just not taking of super centrist, trying to compromise too much in our particular view, just because the compromise, I think, comes to at the kind of the loss of what is probably a plurality or majority of the neighborhood, which is considering options to modify how we go about business, as not business with a lowercase b, just as a neighborhood, as that affects, you know, the for money business, but also just our day-to-day lives, and hoping that at least this particular agency can acknowledge that and incorporate that in what they might decide for the moratorium zone going forward. And then the second point related to that, us saying as an ANC that we would like to see the limit of tavern licenses in the neighborhood raised or eliminated does not mean that that number of taverns is automatically going to begin operating in the neighborhood. Is potential, but you know, there's other factors. You know, there have to be vacant units that are available for a business to move in. They also have to be able to pay for it. It's just like any other business. There's a number of variables that come into play. It's very much possible that if we were to say, oh, we want this to be a 50 tavern limit or a 100 tavern limit, and somehow, surprisingly, ABCA says, yeah, let's make it 1,000. And then we get flooded, it's possible. But in all reality, the business decisions will probably slow down some of that. Plus, as has been repeated here, settlement agreements, plus also just the fact that a restaurant or any liquor license holding establishment doesn't need ANC support for a permanent license, but the lack of ANC support, especially the presence of a protest, is something that's often taken very seriously and given great weight, and that can be something that really deters what could be a potential bad actor or bad faith actor from taking place. It's an art. There's no easy way to just guarantee this institution that hasn't even started operating yet is going to be harmful. You can't know that for sure. But there's ways to kind of gauge based on what they're planning and just kind of getting a read for their really business operations perspective of trying to mitigate potential harm. So all those things considered, I think that those are all good points to raise, but the nuance to the context, I think, is important as well.
Sean, Lori said she'd like to speak again.
First of all, to address your comment about talking to my neighbors, I think I am one of the more connected neighbors to my neighbors on the street I live on, which is Vernon Street, and know that many of my neighbors, I can't say all, I can't say most, but many of my neighbors strongly oppose adding more taverns based on our experience, because we've had a tavern added to what was before a quiet residential street, and it has had adverse impacts. But my biggest point was that the settlement agreements are imperfect tools for trying to keep peace and quiet in an orderly neighborhood and making it a good neighborhood to live in. And that the moratorium is another tool. And I think it's an important tool, because by limiting the number and trying to reach settlement agreements with them, then you have more control. Adding to the number and then saying we can work through a settlements agreement with them, I think doesn't take into consideration some of the difficulties of working settlement agreements and enforcing them.
Oh, I 100% agree. It's not a perfect tool. Neither is the moratorium zone. So trying to find a nice balance between the two and making sure that we don't have a bunch of empty storefronts in our neighborhood that also make it really terrible and trashy and not a place that people want to be. These are all things that we're trying to juggle here. I don't think it's an easy answer. And I don't think it's just, one or the other, which is why we're trying to strike a compromise. Andrew had a question about which tavern it is in question that Lori is speaking about. And he's got a good point. Maybe there are actually ways that we can still work with you all to get better enforcement. That is part of the resolution as well, is to try to stress upon ABRA that they need to better enforce the current settlement agreements that we do have. So Lori, be happy to work with you if that's what you need. And Brian, did we adequately address the question that you had in there about the new? Cool. Yeah, it would be 4 on top of any existing ones and any of the current ones that are being renewed that year. So we'll make that clear. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, Deborah. I think that there are positive and negative externalities of a lot of these businesses in the neighborhood. And part of living in a community is figuring out how to, make sure that the positives outweigh the negatives and that people are in support of it. Commissioner Wood?
Yeah, just related to the question, I'll read it out loud for anyone who doesn't have the chat. Just how are adverse cumulative impacts related to taverns handled? This is just my perspective, but I think that a lot of attention actually goes towards formerly ABRA, now ABCA, and liquor licenses and how that can be a tool for dealing with issues that are not directly related to liquor, like having trash is something that happens regardless of if you have liquor. But compared to other DC agencies, they're a bit more responsive or maybe less non-responsive than is preferable. So I think that that's often utilized just as a way to get someone from DC government to do something to kind of clean up messes, literal or figurative. So the downside to that is that there are probably some cases where the perspective of alcohol sales isn't necessarily relevant to what needs to be enforced, but enforcement is still enforcement. So I think that that is kind of where it ends up, which is an imperfect solution to a wider problem, which is a lot of DC agencies being understaffed or just poorly staffed and not necessarily doing the things that need to be done in order to keep our neighborhoods safe, clean, pleasant, quiet when we want them to be, not quiet when we don't want them to be. And also, in addition to that, I think it's an important point that just adverse cumulative impacts in general are not necessarily things that people agree on. I mean, just this process of the last few months, that there are some things that people think are a great thing for the neighborhood, and another equally valid group of the same neighborhood can have a completely opposite perspective. So as the ANC, that's what I've kind of been saying, is tricky, because on one hand, we could try to find some sort of thread into a needle and say, well, we want to balance all of this very carefully. And on the other hand, it's also valid to say, at least as individual commissioners, I'm going to choose one of these different routes as opposed to trying to overbalance, just because at least has some clarity to the position taken. I've kind of tried to lean towards that, not because I want to dismiss other positions, but it's a lot easier for ABCA to take that as opposed to balancing a balanced position already. Because if you're trying to overcompromise, it can end up just being kind of muddled, in my opinion. I could be mistaken, but that's just the approach I've taken to try to do this, which is difficult. We're unpaid and not trained to negotiate this whole process, but I've really, I think, benefited a lot from learning the ins and outs, specifically of moratoria and the moratorium zone impacts in the city, because it seems like no one really knows kind of empirically what the impacts are, although a lot of people have very strong opinions. So it's been fascinating to try to sift through all that.
And there's one final comment in there that Jean Stewart just said that she has to go, but she remains opposed to change in the current moratorium. Does wonder about efforts from commissioners in the bid to work with city organizations to attract other kinds of small businesses. It's a great point. Oh, and it looks like Benedictine Brunn has raised their hand to talk.
Good evening. My name is Benedicta Brun, and I am a former board member of the Recook Neighborhood Association and an activist in Washington, D.C. I have worked with, the ANC for years with the Colorado Citizen Association. I was actually the ABC representative for the Recook Neighborhood Association. We have been, fighting to keep in place the moratorium for years. The renewal has been a success. We have been able to, go to the ABC board, find some resolutions and with some bad actors in restaurants and resolve some conflicts. The moratorium has been a way for keeping, the peace, order, and quiet in Adams Morgan for many years. I've been living in this neighborhood for 26 years. Mine is a few years overseas. I know the area very well. I'm very familiar with how protest hearing works. And, I encountered and interacted with a lot of managers and owners of restaurants and taverns. We're not against the coming of new restaurants in Adams Morgan. The problem we're having with taverns is that they have a tendency to consider themselves as a nightclub. So they always pretend that they're not going to, create issues and problems, but actually, they get very noisy and loud. So I understand that there are some, empty front stores, but I don't believe that bringing more taverns is going to solve the problem. The problem is the outrageous price for rent that landlords are asking. And Adams Morgan used to be a mixture before both of you arrived in this neighborhood, before both of you were ANC commissioners. We used to have more stores. We used to have Miss Dixie, the furniture store. We used to have some other, we had clothing stores. We had, there was another furniture store that is now in Georgetown, and replacing, all those premises with the taverns, and I don't think it's the right idea. we're having enough problems, with the violence, the crime, fights at night. We used to have, MPD with the ABC board. We created the Adams Morgan. It was the Adams Morgan. Oh, I'm sorry, it's been so many years, where we had MPD that used to come from Thursday until Sunday morning. And they used to be able to control the crowd and avoid that, much of the violence, and especially physical assaults that we used to have in the side streets from 18th Street. So having to deal with people, throwing up on your property, urinating on your property, trashing your property because they are drunk after they're spending, hours in a tavern is really not ideal. And also is going to attract more traffic. Parking is just also going to be an issue. We're not against businesses. We just want to have, reasonable business in Adams Morgan. We don't want to be, to have a bad reputation, because at some point Adams Morgan had the worst reputation in Washington, D.C. We lost some kind of, clientele. They moved to U Street, they moved to Georgetown, they moved to Shaw. And at some point we got, reckless patrons. So the moratorium is a way, to make the neighborhood, more secure. And like one of the one of those comments where why don't we have attract different type of businesses in Adams Morgan, which will be great. And some of them left, but I don't believe that the stores left because the moratorium was in place. It's not because the moratorium was in place that those stores left. When you talk to the owners, they said the rent was not affordable anymore. It's always the question of affordability of the rent. So I'm for the moratorium. I'm not really for more taverns, but I'm more for having restaurants coming, and we have new restaurants in place. And if we want to change, the reputation of Adams Morgan and have it more attractive, I don't believe taverns are going to be the answer to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts. Appreciated. Deborah has her hand up.
Hi, thanks very much. I've attended a few of the ANC meetings where this moratorium has been discussed, and I cannot remember the rationale that was provided for determining 25 was a good number to increase. I know that number's changed over time on the last few months, and just trying to understand the rationale behind that number. Thank you.
I think I'll speak to it, and then Commissioner Wood can as well, but it felt like it was an incremental step, and that it wasn't a complete elimination of the moratorium. We wanted to still keep it in place as a tool. We didn't want too much of an increase, but we felt this amount of an increase was one that might be something that the neighborhood could absorb in a reasonable way, and with the types of businesses that could actually add to the neighborhood without detracting from it. It's also a reasonable number of settlement agreements for the commissioners to try to negotiate over this period in the event that we need to be doing that, and to really look into all these businesses and make sure that they're actually going to improve the neighborhood culture and offer something for the neighborhood. So it felt like it was a reasonable number that we could agree on as commissioners. That seemed like it was between fully eliminating the moratorium, which quite honestly some of the commissioners are for, and not doing anything at all, which fewer of the commissioners are for. So it felt like it was kind of a reasonable compromise. Commissioner Wood?
Yeah, just to go off of that, I mean, there's no magic number for trying to figure these things out. If it exists, I don't know how to find it. Maybe you have to, it's behind a paywall or something. But I say this as someone who actually have walked around the neighborhood and tried to by hand count the number of units that are vacant. It's very difficult. Not all units are visible from the street level. Some are technically not vacant, but look like it. Some are the opposite. I mean, it's a difficult thing. Unfortunately, as far as I know, that database or that set of data does not exist, or at least isn't publicly available. So this is just kind of, like I was kind of saying earlier, an attempt to make some sort of relatively informed with limited set of information suggestion to ABCA, who truly has the responsibility to incorporate these and all the other comments that have been provided to try to figure out if they were to adjust or eliminate, well, we'll just take adjust. If they're to adjust the number of tavern licenses, the cap permitted in Adams Morgan, it's up to them to try to figure out some sort of quantification. Whether or not they'll do that in a good way, I don't know, or if they'll do that well. And with the type of information, I think it would inform that well. It's impossible to tell, but it's up to their staff. That's what they're paid to do. So I hope that that's the case. And this is just, I think, an attempt to try to, frankly, kind of guess, but in an informed guess based on what seems reasonable, based on the number of properties that exist, and finding some sort of middle ground to try to at least say, hey, the point isn't necessarily the number in itself, but the idea is the act of changing that number is something that there are at least some people in the neighborhood that are amenable to it. And at least on the commission in the past, it seems like that has been, the majority of those people have decided to vote for people to put into commissioner positions who share that sentiment. So we still haven't decided as a full commission we're going to do anything or what, but I think that's important, as well as the argument, forgot to mention this, kind of related to all this, that it's again, it's not clear, it's not guaranteed, but there is a strong argument, I think, to having some more actors that are going to bring in more customers, for example, taverns, and that creates more flow of potential customers for other types of businesses. It's potential to have a snowball effect. So if you don't have every vacant unit kind of occupied by new tavern license holders, or especially bars that are going to explicitly sell alcohol, but some other business owners or potential business owners could come in and say, well, this is more potential clients for our business that doesn't depend on alcohol sales. That's a semi-ideal solution. I mean, the ideal solution would be the type of kind of nostalgic neighborhood markets and things that I think a lot of us would really truly love to go back to. I've spent a lot of time abroad where there are neighborhoods that do exist like that. I don't think they have moratorium zones for whatever it's worth, but the world's imperfect, and it's not always fun to have to accept that. But I think this is collectively our process of trying to figure out how to exist as a commission and speak to that imperfection.
Thank you, Commissioner Wood. Any other public comments? Looks like Deborah would like to speak.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the thought that everyone is putting in on this. What are the next steps?
Good question. So the next step is that it goes to a vote of the full commission. That'll be the first Wednesday in May. And then after that, ABRA at some point between that point and June 6th, when the moratorium expires, we'll hold a meeting where they discuss this and make a decision, taking in any feedback from the ANC, from any other organizations that would like to express their opinion on that. The Civic Association certainly can as well. Citizens associations, though I despise that title, also are allowed to weigh in. So those are the other avenues for making an impact here. Commissioner Wood?
And just to add on, just because this whole process for this current moratorium vote started when I was chairing this committee, and I know that Commissioner Foskini, you're similarly diligent in talking to now ABCA, but when I first initiated back in November, December, they were pretty much hoping that the ANC would have some sort of voted upon decision so they could make some sort of official decision in January. we took the route of requesting more time, and they granted that time to significantly increase the amount of public input possible. Frankly, a lot of the public input, which I truly think has been valuable, has been pretty much exact replicas of the exact same discussion in 2018, 2014, 2004, 2000. So it's like, it's the same exact dynamic with some important caveats. Still worth having the conversation, I think. And like I said, I've learned a lot, but the next steps could be that we do nothing. We don't have to do anything as a commission. It's probably in our best interest to take some sort of position, but the real point is ABRA, now called ABCA, has wanted the ANC to do something for a while. We have not, because we've been deferring to trying to make as much public input available as possible. So I hope we've satisfied that. Anyone who's not satisfied, I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed, but this is what we've done and we've tried.
Any other public comments?
I'm going to move
Okay,
that we.
see,
I was just going to move that we put this on the agenda, discuss as a full commission.
I agree. I would do that, saying that with the caveat, if you take it as a friendly amendment, that it came forward with the support of the ABC committee. Oh, I can't hear you.
I didn't say anything. That counts as a second, right? Sounds like we're both on the same page of having this voted upon.
Voted upon, but it would be put on the committee meeting or the full ANC meeting with the support of the ABC if we so vote.
I just meant it sounds like we both want to vote on that in this particular committee meeting right now. That's all.
Cool. Well, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so it passes, goes forward to the full ANC meeting the first Wednesday in May. The vote is 2-0 in favor. It looks like I agree with that comment that the important fact is to enforce the settlement agreements as much as possible. Otherwise, it's anarchy. Okay, with that, we can move to the first item on the agenda, which is a public safety update from Captain Hong. Thank you for waiting, Captain.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Right. Sorry about not making the beginning of it. It got tied up, but it's good to see everybody. I'm going to try a little different thing because I know sometimes it's easy to do month by month, but sometimes there's more recent incidents that may have occurred in the new month. So I'm just going to go back about 30 days. So this period comparison is going to be from March 11th to April 11th, and we're going to be comparing 2022 to 2023. So it's still a month of stats, but more recent. And so in general, we've had a slight increase in total crime from 46 to 50 in 2023. It's mainly theft from auto. We've had a decrease in violent crime, down from 4 to 3. We had 2 robberies, which is the same as 2022. And for burglaries, we went down from 2 to 1 for this year. I'll briefly touch on the robberies and burglaries and then open it up to any questions or concerns. The first robbery we had was April 9th, around 7:11 p.m. It was at Columbia and Quarry Road. It was actually an unarmed carjacking where citizen on a motorcycle was pushed off the motorcycle by 3 suspects. 1 suspect rode off on the motorcycle and 2 others ran away. The second incident was on April 8th, around 2:48 a.m. in the 1700 block of Columbia Road. It was an assault with intent to rob, where 2 suspects approached brandished a handgun, demanded the watch of the victim. The victim refused, and a physical altercation ensued, at which point the suspect struck the victim with the blunt side of the handgun, causing a laceration, and then fled without obtaining any property. The burglary that we had, it was an unoccupied business in the 1700 block of Columbia Road. It appears the front door was unlocked and two suspects were able to go in and out through that unlocked front door. There's no mention of any alarms triggering because the door was unlocked. And before we go into any questions or concerns, just as a reminder for the general public, if you do happen to find yourself in the unfortunate situation of a robbery, it's not recommended that you resist if all they're asking for is property. Your safety and health is more of a priority than the property that they may obtain.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it. Commissioner Wood.
All right, thanks. So I guess two related questions. The December, January, February kind of series of crimes that seem to be basically always breaking glass with rocks and stealing cash. How has that, what can you say about that? If you know what I'm talking about, I think you do. And on a related note, I've heard from a lot of constituents that there still has been similar issues, but just instead of breaking glass, there's people coming in and robbing businesses or attempting to with weapons that aren't rocks. And they think that it's different people entirely than the two or three that were the main suspects of that string. Is that something that you've seen? Is there progress on that front as well? So kind of two related lines.
Yeah, so definitely the first question, because we were able to, the detectives did a great job, the officers did a great job. They were able to link so many of the cases to those three individuals. And with the arrests that were made, and I believe at this time, two of them are still held, we have seen a basic stop on what was just an ongoing trend. And just as these stats showed, we had a decrease as far as comparison to 2022 with the one burglary report. And this one wasn't even any kind of forced entry. We've always had, and this is not just Adams Morgan, but different parts of throughout the city, we will have the occasional burglary, destruction of property, different suspects, the rash of crime that was occurring consistently. I believe that has been closed out, and we should not see a return of that. As far as the concerns about the armed robberies of establishment, I'll have to circle back and see what specific incidents or dates and locations might be referred to, so I can get further detail for accurate information.
Thanks. And related to that first point, has there been any luck getting motive, trying to figure out why people were going through the neighborhood, breaking glass, stealing cash, or has that been hard?
Not at this time, but depending on how the court proceedings go, there's always an opportunity that if the subjects want to do a plea deal, part of it may be that they negotiate, sharing additional information that of motive or other locations that may also have been targeted by them that were not closed out and included. So that's something that their attorneys and the courts and prosecutors may be discussing, but as of now, we don't have a motive.
I appreciate that, and thanks for all the responses.
Sure.
There are a couple of follow-up questions I wanted to ask to Captain Hong. So I got a report from a constituent yesterday that the Delight Cafe was robbed again in the morning time. It didn't sound like that was on the list of that you gave me. It would have been April 11th, so it should have fallen into that if you were running through the 11th?
Yeah. So what I did find is once in a while, depending on the time of the report, if it falls in between the dates at the end of the query, it may not pick up. So I can try doing a search. I could probably try tonight for the 12th. If it's not showing up, then I can try again tomorrow to carry April 12th, and then I can follow up with that information.
Okay. That would be great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Just unfortunate that I think this is now the third time that they've been robbed, and then also an arson, and it's just a lot for a small business to take. They can't sustain like constantly getting these kinds of assaults on their business. So feel for them a lot. And then I'd also just lift up, there's still, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, one thing we can do is we'll see if during the business hours, if one of our managers or officials can get in contact with the cafe and see if they're open to having us do a security walkthrough. Sometimes we do that for residential properties or businesses in case we can identify some security weaknesses or areas that could be improved, and it may help them in the future.
Great, thank you, Captain. That'd be really appreciated. And I'd note too, just that there are a lot of crimes that feel violent to people and don't fall particularly within these like established definitions of violent. So, I've gotten reports from constituents that they were yelled at or harassed by people on the street while walking their dogs. One said that a man was drinking directly from a wine bottle on Columbia and threatened the person walking their dog and then tried to fight them. One tried to kick their dog. One had a knife clearly out in their hand. I've had reports still of folks stealing packages and trying to force their way into buildings and break into buildings in the neighborhood. I know that my building also had another robbery where someone snuck in and to the garage and worked with others to clear out a bunch of stuff from down in the garage. So there's still, there's, even if it doesn't fall directly into these violent crimes categories, there's still a lot that's making folks feel unsafe in the neighborhood, feeling like they need that they need to just be much more careful and vigilant than they had to be in the past. And there's still kind of this general sense of malaise. So I wanted to just pass that along, that I'm still getting a lot of these from my constituents. And while I certainly appreciate everything that you all are doing, we know that you're working hard. Just know that there's still a lot of need, and there's a lot of folks out there in the neighborhood that still are feeling pretty unsafe.
Yeah, I can understand that. And we'll continue to address all the crimes. Definitely for anyone, if they have any kind of negative interaction with someone who is just aggressive, if they observe any illegal activity or even quality of life, like drinking in public, they're welcome to call 911 from a safe distance. They can meet the officers. They can point out what the issue is. If they want to remain anonymous, they can. If they provide a good description, we may be able to locate and contact and take additional steps. But we'll continue to try to serve the public as best we can.
I appreciate that, Captain. And then there were two more, and I have not seen yet whether or not the cases have been closed for the homicides that took place on 18th Street in front of Air, and then the other homicide that took place on Euclid and Ontario at the end of last year. And I was just wondering if you have any updates on either of those cases.
Offhand, I don't believe they have been closed. And typically any homicide cases, when they are closed, there will be a press release.
Cool. Thank you. I'd certainly appreciate you passing those along as soon as those come through.
Sure.
Thank you, Captain. I'd like to open it up to the to any other members of the public who have any comments or questions for the captain. Okay, seeing none and seeing no hands raised, that was the last item on our agenda tonight. Captain Hong, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time as always. And I officially call this meeting to close.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.